will be dominated unless unless that script changes by his domestic message. We're promised that we'll get a glimpse of the light at the end of the tunnel. We're even told that Keir Starmer will promise to return joy to people who aren't. I mean this in respectful way. He's a bit of a lacking bringer of joy, isn't he? Well, that's why he sent me out to carry the message to you and your listeners this morning. Because you're a professional bringer of joy. Absolutely. If there's sunshine and optimism you want, then obviously they picked me as the spokesperson for it, and I'm delighted to carry out the role. I think this afternoon's speech is such a big moment for the Labour Party. We have been out of power for so long. There is a myth of a pendulum in British politics, that somehow power swings back and forth between the Conservatives and the Labour Party as a kind of natural process. History confounds that now. The win in July was only the fourth time in 100 years that Labour has won a convincing majority from opposition. Only the sixth convincing majority in the whole modern electoral history. So the first speech in 15 years from a Labour Prime Minister to a Labour conference is a big moment to set out the story of the government. That's what he uses. The story
推咗啱啱之後推咗。你要等垃圾，即係再多啲垃圾自己抌出去啦。
There are going to be more disappointments to come. Only yesterday, the nurses interrupted the Chancellor's speech by rejecting the payoff that they got. And quick as you could, the government minister said, well, tough, we're not giving you any more. Is that your message? Not just the nurses, local government workers, people who earn very little money are wanting a pay rise. You saying, I'm really sorry? No. There are two parts to this story. And one is the inheritance that we've had, which is a tight fiscal picture, and that expresses itself in different ways. Could be a decision on benefits, could be a decision on pay. Any individual decision is about this difficult fiscal inheritance. Now, we've been challenged during the summer. People have said, don't talk about that. It's doom and gloom. You're talking the country down. I do have to reflect that the Conservatives spent at least 10 years talking about the inheritance that they said they'd received from the last Labour government. And I think for a period of at least 10 weeks, we are allowed to point this out. When you've got a creaking NHS, when you've got a prison system on its knees, when you've got a big black hole in the public finances, and all of this, we're entitled to point this out, but it's only one part of the story. The other part of the story is if we can get these public finances on a stable footing, even if that involves some difficult decisions, the prospects for the country are good. Britain is a great country in which to invest. This new government, with a stable majority for the next parliament, if you compare it to other countries around the world right now, is a good, stable place to invest and grow a business. And that is where we will get the real beneficial growth over the coming years if we make the right decisions now. Isn't one of the reasons you get criticism is how vague this new government is? Change, you said in the election. Nobody really knew what that meant other than changes from the Tories. We're told the Prime Minister will talk about being a great reforming government. Yeah, here we are. You can't point to a single great reform that we did up there in this one. Didn't we get it in the speech? We've announced plenty of sense support in July. We've got the ban on onshore rent, which reduced pioneering legislation on rail and buses, with improving the rights of renters. There is a lot going on with the outdoor announcements. When I read the front pages this morning, I have some stories about about changing apprenticeships, about a new duty of candor here in Liverpool on the right city to announce it. Part of it stems from what happened with the Hillsborough. So I think there are substantial announcements today. But I think more important than any substantial announcement is the story set out in the speech, which is going to be we have to get stability now in order to get the real future, all the benefits that we get. There is one other story on the front page you didn't mention, which Conservative who were up in the opposition was suggested that you're going to
係你 cut 定我細妹妹 cut 係你 cut 定細妹妹 cut 嚇？會 cut 嘅，做咩 cut 嘅？嚇 ？Why？ Really？係咪喺 camping 嗰邊 cut 㗎？ camping 嗰時凍親，係冇凍啊？瞓覺嗰時 camping 瞓覺唔凍咩？
94% state that the deal is subject to approval from the Premier League, the Football Association and the Financial Authority. Manchester City's Rodri will have further testing in the injury will accept to move an extended building time. The Liverpool were travelling to Spain yesterday for initial tests on that injury that was sustained at City's draw on Sunday. City are in third round action in the league. Captain Knight against Watford. The tie-break between AFC Wimbledon and Newcastle United have been postponed. Was flooded at the League Two Stadium. Cricket and Wimbledon have won the one-day cup for the second time in 4 years, beating Somerset by 15 runs. That match was cut short from 50 to 20 overs due to the weather. Hopefully, 25 overs today will be England against Australia's third one-day international at Chester was hit and Scott Stewart part of the Test match special team. Ali, I won't ask you to win forecast, but there is a lot of talent in this England side. They are 2 more down in this series against Australia. What's been the difference so far?
Well, it's a bit doubtful this year, that's all I'll say so far. It's raining right now. England had positions in both matches so far. Cambridge, they were 213 for 2, they then fell away to 315 all out. In Leeds, they had Australia 6 down to 160 odd, but then themselves with the bat collapsed again, 65 for 5 they found themselves. I mean, they're lacking experience, that is for sure. Josh Butler for this series, there's Bairstow in the squad, and a talented Moeen Ali, and a really stark stat is that Adil Rashid is England's lead run scorer in ODI cricket within this squad. And so one thing they might want to get out of today, though, they've been rotating their fast bowlers. I've seen how Joshua Archer goes, he did bowl a full 10 at Trent Bridge, and he could well return his third match today. But certainly with the bats, if they get themselves into a strong position, he would be to just carry on and actually make the most of the platform they get.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, watching this England team, you do get the impression they're the kind of team where it doesn't really matter that they're 2 more down. They do seem just confident, don't they?
Well, there's Harry Brook famously said after the first match that, who cares if we, get out, hitting, trying to clear the boundary, which I think was sort of badly phrased way of saying what their mentality is. And we know that this mentality is the Brendan McCullum way. It's this air of we will keep trying to entertain, we'll keep trying to go big, and when it comes off, it comes off. But actually, sometimes you do need to play that match situation. And Australia have these anchor batters who are, a lot of experience, a lot of success playing longer form cricket, test cricket. And sometimes you need to have those batters to drop anchor and build around them. The cold hard facts here are that Australia, the world champions, are on a winning streak, having won 14 in a row. England have lost 10 of their last 14. So they do need to turn this around.
Yeah, and they have England failed in that defence recently of both the white ball world titles, but they are building, aren't they? They're looking at Champions Trophy, the next T20 World Cup and the 50 over World Cup, which is in the next few years. Is that the sense of what they're doing at the moment?
Well, very much so. I mean, it is a very new look side. I mentioned some of those big names that are missing, and younger names coming in. Debuts for Jacob Bethel, for example. He hasn't fared too badly with the bat so far, but it is just about being able to get that experience to build. And they are up against a very, very strong Australian outfit, albeit an Australian team that in the first game were depleted through illness and injury. That was where England really should have tried to capitalise. The talent is there. It's having that application, and it's having the application over the 50 over format when so many of these players live on the diet of T20 and 100, because of course the 50 over game that in the past many would have grown up with just isn't played domestically by the best white ball players anymore.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing what happens. Ali Mitchell, thank you. And the Test match special team with Ali will be joined by the England fast bowler Mark Ward on 5 Sports Extra from 12:15.
我估你尋日去嗰間學校，你中唔中意嗰間學校 ？Headset Academy。You like Headset Academy?
By storing carbon dioxide under our feet. Anna Corey is an environmental engineer working through figuring out how industries can safely store the CO2 they produce in formations under the Earth's surface. Decarbonising industry is a big ask, but Anna is optimistic, noting that attitudes have changed. Certainly since her PhD days, when her thesis prompted one big business representative to warn her, don't open a can of worms. We'll be discussing changing attitudes and the potential of storing carbon dioxide under the seabed in the Life Science Academy after the news at home. We'll catch up on this.
Well, with weather today, the southeast will see any rain clear away, it will then be a partly cloudy day with a few isolated showers or many. You're listening to Today on Radio 4 with my manager, London, but
Stop reading that. Is he okay? Stop reading.
Israel has carried out fresh airstrikes overnight in southern Lebanon as housing gone. Lebanese health officials said that almost 500 people were killed in Israel's attacks yesterday. Israel's military said they hit 1,600 Hezbollah targets. Sir Keir Starmer will use his first Labour Party conference speech as Prime Minister to promise long-term gain for the UK. Starmer will follow people who join a shared struggle through short-term economic pressures. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, told today that the speech was a big moment for the party to support.
我哋今日翻去幫忙嘅整嗰兩個 video。
A barrister representing women who say they were assaulted by
Page 23,
Nicola Hart has criticized Harrod's own investigation in
你整咗先就會
declaring
自己
not
自己
sufficient
啲嘢得唔得？
or robust.
啊，哥哥。
Maria Muller from the group
哥哥。
Justice for Harrod Survivors told this program they had received shocking allegations from across the world. The current owners of Harrods have described the fate as appalling and said there were several legal claims. The store is carrying out an internal review to determine whether any current staff were employed.
Luigi, thank you very much. It's 8 minutes to 9. President Zelensky will use a special session of the United Nations Security Council today to urge greater support for Ukraine. In an interview with ABC News' Robin Roberts, he said his country was closer to the end of the war with Russia than some people thought, but that depended on getting Ukraine recognition of strength.
It's not about the decision. No, it's not like I said, it's a bridge to economic way out of the war. The bridge is a plan of or victorious plan. It's a strengthening of Ukrainian army and Ukrainian people. Only in the strong position we can push Putin
你尋日哥哥，
diplomatic.
你尋日咪好早去到學校嘅？ O 唔 OK 啊，哥哥
He'll present it to Western
No.
backers. It is a crucial
You don't like it?
diplomacy for the Ukrainian leader as he visits the US and our Europe
你要唔要去
correspondent
Breakfast Club 啊咁？
report on Kiev on what Mr. Zelensky's
No.
strategy may amount to and
咁
whether
你喺
the
嗰度做
people
做
of
咩今日
Ukraine are yet prepared to make
Sure.
concessions for the sake of peace.
你有冇啲嘢係可以喺嗰段時間做到啊？嗰 half an hour。Do you think? Do you think you have something you can do in that half hour? The reading or go for a walk in the area? I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dimitro was among those armies outside. The soldiers faced red lips and badly burned. Those armies recently injured fighting in Ukraine's east. For him, there can be no peace, while Russia remains in any part of the country.
一模嚟嘅。
We will not surrender our territory to which so many people have fallen. To end the war at this stage, what will we fight for?
We go back to frontline and we fight again.
We'll try. Of course, my brothers, my comrades.
因為爸爸排喺度啊嘛
I。will not retreat. I will be there until my last breath.
28-year-old Tatiana's husband is also in the military. What to you?
你落唔落到車啊？嗰個
Like, you'll be willing to
落唔落到啊？嗰度？你落唔落到車嗰度？你睇下，得唔得啊 ？OK。
say we will fight.
Both through pieces on the Stadium Scotland Red Drill website, and if you're really interested in drills, you can monitor them more closely. As one volunteer, Marlo, and when they described it for us in an audio guide.
I might make it a box now and just open up the lid and have a look at it and see any visible hairs. It's okay if I don't, I'll look at it under a microscope later. But just having a peek now, I can see that my hairs is really something. I'll just peel off the sample now. I'm going to replace it with now I just need to replace the face. And that should be done with this one.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Marlo, for that. Let's be why do grey squirrels cause such problems for them?
Yeah, so grey squirrels are a non-native invasive species here in the UK. Our red squirrels are our only native squirrels, and not just that, but the grey squirrels will help each other. They make resource for food and habitat, as well as carry the squirrel pox virus. They carry it asymptomatically, but is unfortunately quite deadly to our native red.
Okay, so what does your project actually involve when you're monitoring and controlling the grey squirrel population? What do your project involve, and what do you want from the everyday punters? How do you want them to get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So the project delivers on the Scottish strategy for red squirrel conservation, which means we work nationally. We work in 3 key areas across Scotland, up in Aberdeen, as you heard Merlo talking from, as well as across the Highland Line, and down in the south of Scotland. And in all of those areas, we work to monitor squirrel populations, both the red and grey squirrels, and that informs our work to actively control and manage the grey squirrel population and make sure that we're ensuring a long-term future for our red squirrels.
And
We also monitor for the spread of smallpox across the country and through Scotland. And the best way to get involved for anyone across Scotland or anyone who's in Scotland is to help be our eyes on the ground and help them monitor.
How much cover the reds are in? How much do the greys cause? What kind of providers do they see?
Sure, so it's a bit of a mixed picture. In the long term, reds have seen a massive decline. At one point, we had reds across the whole UK all the way down to the south of England. And as many people and your listeners will know, we've seen that decline. So about 80% of the UK's remaining red squirrels are left in Scotland. But the good news is that those populations in many places are increasing. We've had local recoveries in many areas that the project works due to the good staff and volunteers. And in the long term, some of the successes that we're seeing with the project, particularly in Aberdeen, really change the narrative of what might be happening across the country. So when looking, it'll take a long time and a lot of effort, but we could see a full recovery in red squirrels across Scotland and across the UK. It's a long-term goal and an ambitious strategy, but it's one that's becoming increasingly realistic.
Well, that means the survey over the next week where you're involved with that same Scotland. Grey squirrels and any of that, the coastal thing.
It's funny, you don't get that was I had a particular time of speech now at the World Conference with the book. That wasn't even a book. It was some sense. When you always think of the World Conference, you are likely to bring the real joy, but that it's about bringing joy back to you. Lucy Fisher, here at Wiser at the Financial Times, I was the company on the road to the question. Lucy, first of all, the brief thing is all about, we get it, we've heard, there's been enough to conclude.
Well, that's certainly the case. I'm struck that he's got this sort of balancing act today to project both light and shade. We also saw the same from Rachel Reeves yesterday, and I think that is striking. But normally you see a good cop and a bad cop clearly delineated, and the PM would normally take the more enjoyable good cop role, and Chancellor holding the purse strings to be the bad cop. You've currently got both of them trying to do both, and I think that is what's muddying the messaging slightly. I think also a big ask from the ministers, and particularly I picked up from some of the new MPs, for him to kind of really communicate a coherent vision. One new MP said to me, it's all very well 5 missions, let's just have one clear mission that the public understands, a really clear long-term economic plan. So I think that's the task he's got to fulfill today in one sense.
And if you do agree with that, it has been a struggle at this conference to see quite what it is the Labour Party wants people to hear.
Well, I think there's Pat, I listened to Pat Fadden, and I think it's right that people should just reflect on the fact that it's been so long since you had a new Labour government coming in, the biggest single majority they've got. The mood has been a bit flat. I think that there has to be confidence, there has to be optimism, but alongside a very realistic assessment of the economic and social condition of Britain. And I know that the right wing are constantly saying, oh, well, we can't keep banging on about the inheritance forever. But I'm afraid they do have to bang on about the inheritance, but at the same time, give a very, very clear sense of the plan that's going to get written into better place. And I think the thing about the doom and gloom and so forth, I think that's interesting to have Lisa on the programme, because I think it was her paper that ran a story recently that showed that once you're in government, the tone of your communications can have a direct impact on how well or badly a country might be doing. So the FT ran a piece recently about consumer confidence. And consumer confidence, which I think should have been energised by the change in government, energised by the sense of a new team with a stable majority and ideas for change, instead of which, because of the way that the messaging is coming over, actually consumer confidence is falling. So I think today has to be... Sorry.
I was just going to allow Richard to pick that up, because it's not just as a consumer, it's also business. We heard on the programme a couple of days ago saying, well, why should I spend money? It's that bad. I'm not sure I want to take the risk.
I think that's right, and there's some sort of confusion from business about why the government is hosting this big investment summit before the budget, when they'll know what the tax landscape is, and many think they're not able to make big announcements on investment before they understand that. Business day yesterday, some people the FT spoke to who attended felt that fell flat. There wasn't much access. They are concerned about the investment, but that of course is the message Rachel Reeves was trying to make yesterday, that capital investment will go up. That will be balanced today by Keir Starmer warning, there needs to be innovative reform in the public sector, and it can't just be, turning on the taps for the money all the time.
And Skimble, famously, you, when you were working for Tony Blair, had a sort of 100-day plan. Is there no such plan this time? I'm struggling to identify the real one.
Well, I think they came in, massive majority, big landslide. I think started very, very well. I think people are very quickly got used to the idea that Keir Starmer is Prime Minister, he's serious, he's hard-working, he's diligent, Rachel Reeves ditto, team of ministers who look and sound like a good government. The riots came along, I think, should have knocked them slightly off course, even though they handled it well. And then I think that what happened in this period, you noticed it, the conference season it triggers a new wave in the parliamentary cycle. And I think in this gap, there has been maybe just a lack of that strategic communication where you understand that in government, which is much, much, much harder than opposition, you have to all the time be devising, executing and narrating your strategy, what the government is for, what the government is trying to do, where the government is trying to get to. And when that doesn't happen, then what tends to happen, particularly with a broadly pretty hostile regime, which is not averse to double standards in the way it treats Labour vis-a-vis the Conservatives, that is when you get stuff filled with clothes and Sue Gray's salary and all the sort of behind-the-scenes stuff. If you have that clear, consistent, strategic narrative that is relentlessly being put out there, which I think Pat was doing actually with you this morning, then that is when you give the country, which, by the way, doesn't want to have politics in its face the whole time. We're sick and tired of politics being so sort of dysfunctional and unstable under the last lot, and now wants that sense of this is what the government's about, this is what the government's trying to do. And it is rooted in the missions. I hear what Lisa's saying about, people maybe just with one day, but I think, no, I get that, but what I think actually about that, it does relate to, economy, energy, health, aspiration and dealing with crime. These are the things that people want to hear about. But I did an event up in Liverpool last night where I was asking, including people who are really plugged into politics, getting saying to people, can you name me the 5 missions? And, frankly, they struggle. And that, you can't blame the public for that. That's a matter of the government being clear in its communication and the narration of that strategy, so that people cannot be in any doubt about what they're trying to do.
If I could stop doing the podcast and go back to your old job, that would sort it simply, wouldn't it? There's something else it's not just the comms, the communication of public, the people I'm talking to around here say, but down into the operation, and they're not critics of Keir Starmer often, it just doesn't quite work. The people aren't quite right.
Well, that's right, and I've got a piece in the FT today, with cabinet ministers urging Starmer to get a grip. They say he usurped his authority on his team in Downing Street, bolstered up and make potentially more hires, but clarified the hierarchy. The final thing I'll say is, at the moment, there is this sense of limbo over the 3 most senior civil servant roles that work with him. Cabinet provider and his principal private secretary.
Lucy Fisher, that piece is in the Financial Times. Thanks for joining us, Alistair Campbell. No doubt we'll have a word on the rest of this point.
4 minutes to 9. We're going to end the program today by turning our minds, our attention to octopuses. To the octopuses, one in particular, has been caught on camera working with fish to catch prey. It's remarkable footage. It really is. Although considered solitary creatures generally, it does seem that octopuses sometimes work with fish to entrap prey. It seems clear that the octopuses are orchestrating the hunt. So much so that if you read some of the coverage in these learned scientific journals, it suggests that if the fish don't do a good enough job, the octopuses quite literally punch them. This is not made up stuff. There's hard science behind it. And Professor Jacqueline McGlade, who's a marine biologist at University College London, joins us now, speaking to us from Kenya, and with extensive experience of this world. Indeed, Professor McGlade, I think some years ago, had some remote Congo side. So you saw something handy for yourself.
Yeah, actually, I should have recorded this. Yeah, when you were first got the voice, you just get to think, well, everything's talking to everything else. But it was literally the same thing where the octopus, a grouper, so a very large fish, basically surrounded the rock, and the big group chased all the little fishes out the other side, and obviously the octopus was waiting. I don't know who benefited first from the food, but it was clearly something they'd done before. So, yeah, it's kind of crazy in the books, but I think it's done to scientific advice from my colleagues around the world, and also UCL, have seen it now again and again, and it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Madison observed the same universal phenomenon by a mystery science Arab's own investigation. As especially that the more robust Maria Mala from Texas survivors said should have missions by the next world. The current members of the Texas on saying that the stories the hospital propaganda was significantly in the Focus August. More than 900 people were seized compared to just over 500 in previous days. BBC News. This is BBC News 24. Coming up, it's as common as Parkinson's and MS. So why are FND sufferers often dismissed and disbelieved? Or getting the mind finds out in half an hour. And we hear how the language used by healthcare professionals to describe pregnancy loss can exacerbate the grief and trauma experienced by some individuals. That's on Woman's Hour at 10 o'clock. But now, Jim Al-Khalili ponders the challenge of decarbonizing industry and possible subterranean solutions in the Life Scientific.
Hello. Plenty of us mull over how we can be more green in our daily lives, recycling and creating less waste, maybe getting an electric car, travelling less by plane, transitioning to renewable energy in our homes. When it comes to industry, decarbonisation, indeed reducing emissions of all sorts, gets more complicated. Fossil fuels are used to manufacture some of mankind's most ubiquitous products, from plastics to cement to steel, and creating them comes with an environmental price tag. The bad news is that even in areas where we're trying to improve our footprint, there are repercussions. Mining lithium for electric car batteries isn't exactly without impact. Add to that stories of corporations prioritising profits and governments focusing on short-term, people-pleasing policies, and it will be easy to feel disheartened. But my guest today says her role is to be the champion of science in this debate, providing clear evidence to help reduce environmental impacts while allowing vital production processes to continue. Anna Corey is an environmental engineer at Imperial College London, where she's co-director of the university's engineering program. Her work led to the development of a risk model used in mining operations around the world, and her current research into subsurface CO2 storage could hold the key to decarbonising British industry. It's incredible to think that as a youngster, expectations were that she would settle and remain in her home city of Athens, rather than pursuing her research passion, something that very nearly came to pass. More on that shortly. For now, Professor Anna Corey, welcome to Life Scientific.
Thank you very much.
I mentioned there your passion for environmental engineering, and really this stems from studying geology at university. What was it that grabbed you about the processes, the ingredients that contribute to the incredibly complex structure of our planet?
Basically, when we look at the natural world, usually we are only exposed to what is on the surface. And when I discovered that there is so much to it, there is physics, there is chemistry, there is dynamic processes that happen through time, that actually was astonishing, and especially the fact that I had to think how our lives and our choices affect what actually happens on the planet and the environment.
Well, clearly you love the field, but it's not an easy one to work in. You know, we've exploited natural resources for years without understanding the consequences of what we're doing. And now we're faced with these huge challenges around how we can change things for the better.
Yeah, so in antiquity, when we started exploiting metals, we were not very much aware of the pollution in the environment, and everything was happening at a small scale. But now we need very substantial amounts of raw materials and energy to supply our economy and our lives. So we are exploiting a lot more. As a result, our impact is also a lot more significant, and we clearly need to do something to adjust our practices.
And adjusting our practices is the important thing. It's not just about, well, let's all switch to renewables and let's use clean energy. We're still going to need some of these materials that are inevitably going to have a damaging effect.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to understand how the planet works so we can exploit these materials a lot more efficiently. but also minimize our impact on the environment so that then the processes are more sustainable, you will call them. If ever extraction of raw materials can be called sustainable, and industry might be considered at times to be the source of the problem. But the reality is that our consumption is the ultimate objective, and this is what the industrial processes are serving. Our need for materials, our need for products, our need for energy.
Well, as I alluded to in the introduction, this debate can be something of a battleground. Major corporations, environmental campaigners, policymakers, and you're there in the middle trying to make sure the science is being heard. How difficult is that?
Extremely difficult. I think you have to see me in my class when it is at the university, where the students get passionate about the role of the industry, and this happens in the classroom, but also happens in boardrooms and in meetings where different industrial interests collide, and academics like me have to stand somewhere in the middle to provide this accurate evidence and information to policymakers who sometimes feel overwhelmed, because it's not a simple problem. So I have to be also quite resilient in getting blows from both sides and coping with the pressure that comes with it.
And of course, industry and governments and activists are the only groups with skin in the game. It's often local communities who are bearing the brunt. I mean, I know you mentioned to my producer one such occasion in South Africa some years ago.
Yeah, that's right. We were out in South Africa with a group of master students from the college, and we were visiting a site that was going to be a mining site, and had local people throwing stones at us. Basically, we were seen as representatives of a foreign company potentially moving in the country to exploit the resources, take away their rights, not seeing significant return for this exploitation and the damage that happens to the natural environment.
It's a valid grievance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that companies actually in recent years have been making a lot of efforts to engage with the local communities, but especially in the early stages of exploration, it's very hard to recruit the people because all they see is big drill rigs digging holes and people collecting samples, and we are not particularly happy about strange people being in their backyard.
Well, Anna Corey, your love of the natural world stems from your childhood in Greece. You grew up in Athens with your mum, dad, and two younger brothers. What sort of childhood was it?
I had a very happy childhood. My family is very close-knit. I had quite a lot of relatives living close by, watching carefully what time I was getting out of the house, what time I was getting back. But at the same time, I also had an extended support network, and I felt very safe. My father was a very solid, hardworking, conscientious man, and my mother very loving, and this gave me huge strength.
Tell me about your parents' background.
My father grew up in a small village on the island of Naxos, it is in the Aegean Sea, high up on the mountains. It's a very picturesque village, but families those days were 7 or 8 children, not very able to support themselves. So when he was 23, he moved to Athens, and he became a builder. He did not have much education. He's gone up to, I think, 3rd grade in the primary school, but he was a very bright man, extremely bright, and he worked hard, supported his siblings, and then got married, and eventually we happened. And my mother was a housewife. I learned quite a lot from her, particularly looking after each other, cooking as well. This is one of the things that I enjoy doing quite a lot.
It was clearly a loving home life that you had growing up, but you said there was a strong sense of people having certain expectations of you, particularly as a young woman.
This, when I was growing up, was still trying to develop, and education is very important amongst the people. But as a woman, you are not expected to do very much. In my days, you were expected to sort of become a school teacher and have a family, and that's it.
Well, at school, you were a good student, this broad range of subjects that you enjoyed, but it was in your teens that your love of science really started to show. Sparked, I hear, by an encounter with a mumbling chemistry teacher.
Yes, it was amazing. She was the sort of person. I used to sit in the last row of desks, right at the back of the class. And this gentleman had a very low pitched voice. When we asked him to increase the sound, he used to go behind his desk and then pretend that he was turning the volume up. So I was not able to hear him very well, and of course I did not get very much. I was doing badly in exams.
I am scared to tell my community about what I know and what I have learned. My worries are real. Our sacred insect is facing an extensive threat. If the loss continues, we too are at risk. Our cultures, our crops, our communities, even our lives. And I'm not sure whether I will be the same type of a man at all.
A Man Without Knees was a Smoke Trail production, and it's from Illuminated, BBC Radio 4's home for creative and surprising on-off documentaries. Many more one-of-a-kind programmes like this, just search for Illuminated on BBC Science. How does reputational protection potentially have the opposite of the desired effect? Find out with two expert gatekeepers in When It Hits the Fan, coming up in just a second or two here on Radio 4.
The conceptual artist Marina Abramovic is renowned for putting her own body on the line with works that are often feats of pain and endurance. And as for her creative influences, well, there she takes issue with the very format of our program.
Work come from life. I hate word influence because I don't think that anything influenced my work. You said that this program and then to call influence. I do everything to destroy this idea. There's no influence.
It is quite an extraordinary interview. Marina Abramovic talking to me, John Wilson, on This Cultural Life, Thursday morning at 11 on Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.
Now we go behind the headlines for all the PR insights and behind the week's biggest news stories.
Hello and welcome to When It Hits the Fan, BBC Radio 4's podcast that lifts the lid on the hidden world of reputation and crisis management. With me, Simon Lewis.
And me, David Yelland. In this episode, Mohammed Al-Fayed. How did the former Arab learner spin his way into the heart of the British establishment? Do the BBC revelations about how state can attack so many vulnerable young women? Ask serious questions about his PR, his lawyers, and the media. Plus, we look at the total and absolute fan hitter that is the Murdoch succession battle in Reno, Nevada, where Rupert Murdoch is at war with 3 of his own children.
Anyone who says they do, they're lying. I'm sorry, they're lying. It wasn't even a secret. It was known in one of the whole company.
David, last week 2 BBC documentaries aired on the Royal Service and on BBC Two about multiple allegations of rape and attempted rape by the former owner of Harrods, Mohammed Al-Fayed. The BBC investigation behind those has revealed horrifying accounts of serial sexual abuse by the Egyptian billionaire who died last year, aged 94, which spanned his 25-year reign at the luxury department store. In the first stage, we must of course pay tribute to the bravery of the women who shared their stories with the BBC and others who've come forward since. We must also say that Harrods released a statement in response to BBC investigation saying it is utterly appalled by the allegations of abuse perpetrated by Mohammed Al-Fayed. He goes on to say, we also acknowledge that during this time of business we failed our employees, victims, and for this we sincerely apologise. The Harrods of today is a very different organisation from the one opened on 12 miles ago, 1985-2010. It's one that seeks to put the welfare of its employees above everything. They've also now said that they're launching an internal to establish its current staff who are involved in the allegations against Al-Fayed. David, listening and watching these documentaries, we're all left thinking, how can this happen on such a scale for so many years? For some, got all the answers together to look at the circle of reputational protection around powerful perpetrators of crimes like Al-Fayed. And that include some people in the media and the world of PR. Dave, we actually both came close to the orbit of Al Fayed at the same time, but I was Communications Secretary to the late Queen, and you were the editor son in the late 1990s.
Yeah, Simon, the tentacles of Al Fayed reach deep into the heart of the media, and indeed the entire British establishment. And we'll talk a little bit about how that worked in a moment. But the very first thing to say here, right at the top, is that Al Fayed was a serial sex offender and rapist who attacked young women and underage girls for years. And that investigation from the BBC, which is called Predator at Harrods, and takes the form of a World Service podcast series, which you can listen to on BBC Sounds, and a quite brilliant 90-minute television documentary, which is on iPlayer. Both are required listening and viewing, really. They totally expose Simon. They operated, who he was, and what he did. So you're quite right, Simon, when you talk about both of us starting these huge roles at the same time, you at the Palace and me at the Sun. It was 1 year after the death of Diana, and of course Jodie Fayed was killed in that crash as well. And we came in at that period, and I think it's important to say that now. At the time, many of my rival newspapers were suggesting that that crash was an intelligence operation by MI5, a hit, in other words, murder Simon by the British state, and that the Duke of Edinburgh even knew about it. I'm sure you remember that. Now, I never printed that story. I never met Fayed, but I may have come close. Here's my story. A few days into editing The Sun, my PA said, there's a massive hamper here. It was just arrived in an Arab van. It was so big that we couldn't bring it upstairs. Now, that's worth the most part. Just in time, now in the country for 10 years. I don't know if I fit here. I wasn't quite excited about it. And just about Leslie Stewart, executive chairman, she was going to make that very wise man. He said, no, you're very excited. What's that? It's massive hamper. It's downstairs from Mohammed Al Fayed. He said, that hamper goes back. We do not accept it from Mohammed Al Fayed. Now, when I watch these documentaries, and I have no evidence here, but I can still ask the question, how many other people do not send the hamper back? And what happens if you accept it? How do you know that you accept it? Invitations to yachts, invitations to pay, to Paris, why do you want to do these things? All this stuff.
As you say, Al Fayed was a complicated conspiracy story around the death of Princess Wales and South Sun during that fateful Paris crash in 1907. And in the years after the accident, Al Fayed continued to play the establishment in the deaths of those Diana. In February 2008, he gave evidence at the inquest into the deaths of David, the couple, and confirmed the reports of principal of London in 1926. His remarks were widely condemned, and in summing up, Colin said, quote, conspiracy theory advanced by Mohammed Al Fayed has been already examined and shown to be without any substance. You know, reactions to the Palace at the time are not surprisingly pretty intense. Let me tell you a kind of little story which is kind of on the other side of the balance sheet.
Yeah.
So there are things called royal warrants. Now, royal warrant is a very personal, quite senior member of the royal family to a public organisation or person who has supplied goods and services to the royal household. If you're granted one, use the royal warrant as a member of the royal family or their products, buildings, etc. And it's granted for a fine to include. And Paris had a warrant on and off, and Paris had a warrant since 1910. Al Fayed lost the warrant granted by Prince Philip in 2000 as a result of a significant decline in the trade relationship in the household of Paris. Not surprising. I was in the room when that decision was made. I'll never forget one of the Queen's most senior advisors, quite very in 2010, Al Fayed said that when all warrants most of them things. And you know, when I think about this, how anyone feel, no matter who it is, a member of the royal family, but the fact is that Prince Philip was accused by Al Fayed of great allegations
think about it from a professional perspective. Now, all of us in business, all very powerful, very wealthy, those are the only people that can afford to have whatever one makes. So, you have to choose who you want. And you have to have your own moral compass inside. But Simon, why don't you just take us into the circle of trust? It's there, how it works.
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, for quite a long time, there was a guy called Michael Cole from the BBC Broadcaster who was the principal advisor to Harvey. By the way, he's been a French diplomat and hasn't so far secretary there for long. And then after that, I think this is quite unique potentially. There was a revolving door that your advisors to Harvey. He came in, maybe every 2 years, they come and then. And I have to say, I always think that's a Amber warning because what do you do then in that trust? When people don't stay along, something's happened in terms of trust. There's been a breakdown of trust in the relationship between an advisor and the principal because based on these trusts, people are supported for long term. But I do think we need to talk a bit more about professionally advised contract hardware, have as many jail, so at some spaces and buy. Because now, I feel quite strong about this because many people feel become synonymous with what Twitter did for many times by in fact, because we simply wait for the most famous people and they get to the one stage up. The problem with that is it became problematic and what was specifically bad about it. Now, because of the other, it was making great trading information, lying silence, selling this tell stories and all sorts. I had one experience with it, which I found particularly unsettling, was we had a debate about a huge yard spin. The thing that struck me about it was his cynicism. It was a deeply cynical man. He couldn't care less about the yard. He was just interested in himself. But that really was something about him that I just found very, very uncomfortable. But I guess, David, that is your job to let go.
We need to stay with that. Max Clifford, judging the case, as the sentence of Clifford have Clifford says, some things I keep out of the paper, some things we put in the paper. This is one I kept out. He picks up the photo, puts it back in the case, closes the case, clicks it, and puts it on the floor. Now, it probably won't surprise you, Simon, that I did not do a huge amount of business with Clifford. I think it's fair to say that I didn't like him. He did not like me. But that is how he ran tabloids.
David, what are the implications for the Harrods brand? I think obviously we'll have to see, but this latest development makes it difficult to draw a line in the sand. Of course, the women who are coming forward, the brave women coming forward, the most important thing is that this happened, that ironies of this story is that the very young women who wanted to work at Harrods wanted to work because they thought it was a fantastic global brand. Isn't that terribly ironic? Now, in their statement, Harrods have said it's been, quote unquote, our priority to settle claims in the quickest way possible, avoiding lengthy legal proceedings that involve the quite right to. I just don't know how easy it's going to be given the number of victims coming forward. Will there be long-term damage? We don't know, but I have to say, Dave, one of the things we've learned in this series is that when it hits the fan, events can move very quickly.
Harrods is owned by the Qataris now, okay? They've got a real reputation for problem to manage. And what's happening is it's spinning out of control because more people are coming out of the woodwork. It's not the responsibility of the Qataris, it's not their fault, but it is a real issue for them, which they are struggling to manage.
I love you, and I can't stop it here. This is disgusting. It doesn't even make any sense. I'm the youngest boy.
Well, like almost the entire Murdoch family themselves and everyone who's ever worked for Rupert, I am, of course, an immense fan of the HBO series Succession. That scene, by the way, which we just heard, with actor Logan Roy, has died, and Kendall, his son, is asking his brother and sister to vote for him. But, wow, what is currently happening and has just happened?
Talk a little bit more about what happens after those difficult decisions that are ahead, because I think there's been a danger over the summer that they've over-indexed on the gloom.
But tough choices weren't far away either. We will have reaction from Liverpool and we'll speak live to Health Secretary Wes Streeting. Israel has continued its strikes on Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Streets are jammed as people flee from the south of that country. We'll have the latest from Beirut. We hear from the election race in North Carolina, where the scandalous campaign of the Republican candidate for governor has imploded. We'll hear why. And
we turn around to watch the mushroom cloud raising in the plane being lifted up by the blast. The Valiant bomber, you know, it went up like a rocket, and we felt the blast when it hit the ship.
A witness of Britain's nuclear test in the Pacific back in the 50s. The Royal Navy veteran tells us what he saw, his reaction, and how it affected his health. We'll start, though, with BBC News, read today by Tina Rich.
Sir Keir Starmer has pledged his Labour government will renew Britain. It said it won't duck tough decisions. His leader's speech at the party's conference. He said it would take time for his government to clear out the Tory rot and require unpopular decisions. But he said there'd be no return to austerity in next month's budget. Our political correspondent Harry Farley joins us live with this report from Liverpool.
Starmer's vision for his government. Labour's slogan of change must be nothing less than national renewal, he said, promising to build a new Britain that was confident in its future. But away from the rhetoric, the Prime Minister warned there were tough trade-offs as he defended the cuts to winter fuel payments. He said if Britain wanted cheaper energy, it needed to accept more pylons above ground. If it wanted to tackle illegal immigration, it would mean granting some people asylum. There wasn't much in the way of new policy. The Prime Minister did announce that armed forces veterans, care leavers and victims of domestic abuse will get better access to social housing, and also confirmed that GB Energy would be based in Aberdeen. But this was a speech that aimed to set a narrative for what Sir Keir hopes will be a decade of Labour in power.
Business leaders in Aberdeen have welcomed the confirmation that GB Energy will be based there. The local Chamber of Commerce said the move would secure the area's status as a global energy capital for decades to come. GB Energy will help fund new clean energy and renewable projects. The Secretary-General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, has said the world cannot afford for Lebanon to become what he called another Gaza. Mr. Guterres was speaking as clashes between Israel and Hezbollah intensified. In his speech to the United Nations General Assembly, the US President Joe Biden said full-scale war was in no one's interest. Our diplomatic correspondent James Lander reports from the UN in New York.
This was just